Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and we're going to continue our Python tutorials here with now methods, classes, lambdas, and include. So we're going to cover those topics. And if you remember from our previous tutorial, we covered lists, sets, and dictionaries. And you notice right here I created a context variable. And what does this look like right now? It is a dictionary, right? This is a context dictionary. And it's not just any dictionary, it has a key value here, which is also another dictionary. The value here is a dictionary. So here's another key value that's a dictionary. And this dictionary here is a key value, right? So let's continue with that. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a method. We're going to start off with a very simple method. And to define a method, we have to say def. And I'm going to call this search contacts. And I'm going to give this method a parameter. So I'm going to call it search. A search keyword parameter. So let's end that, and there is our method. But this method isn't doing anything right now, so I'm going to copy this variable here, and I'm going to put it into our method. And of course, I got to format this correctly, so now I tab that over, and it is in the correct method format. What I'm going to do with this method is I'm going to pass in this parameter, and I wanted to search our contacts here. And let's say I pass through a parameter called Steve Rogers here. You'll notice here I'm using the Avengers as another example. I love the Avenger movies. So Steve Rogers, you know that he is Captain America, right? And Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel. So right here I'm going to say x equals contacts dot get, and of course you remember from our previous tutorial we can say dot get, and that will search for a key and return the value of that key. So I'm going to get our search term, because that's what we're going to use to search. And down here I'm going to say if x, if that exists, then I'm going to print. I'm going to print the I want to print the email actually of the value of the email of this. So to print that, I'm going to say x.get again email, right? Because x is now equal to the value of that key that I just searched. X is equal to that value, which is the whole dictionary here. And then I have to do another get, right, to get the value of the next key. So it's going to do that, and we're going to have a else. If that does not exist, I'm going to print out no record found. And there you go. We have a complete method here that works. So how do we call this method? We just call it by saying search contacts. And we got to give it a parameter here. It's the key search keyword. So I'm going to search for, let's say, Carol Danvers. So it's going to search for that, and it's going to go through it, and it's going to print it out. So if I search for Carol Danvers, which is printing the email of it, it's going to return back here Captain Marvel, right? So let's give that a try. Say Python 3.03.py. There we go. It returned Captain Marvel at Avengers, right? It found that. Let's step through it. I'm calling search contacts. I'm passing through a parameter, which is this search keyword here. And down here it's saying x equals contacts.get search for that keyword. It searches here, it doesn't see it. It searches here, it sees Carol Danvers. And now x equals to this whole thing here, this whole dictionary of key and value. So since it found it, I'm saying print x.get email now. So x, which is set to that value right here, is getting the email of this dictionary. And the email of this dictionary is Captain Marvel. There you go. Let's say I want to return something. So I'm going to say return val equals that, right? So whatever I call is going to return whatever this executed, and instead of printing it, I'm going to return x.get email. So now instead of printing the email, it's going to return the email for me. Let's do the same thing down here. I'm going to return no record found. So it's returning that string for me. So to print this, I have to say print return val, and that should work and return, and it should print out this return value. So let's execute this, and there you go. It did exactly the same thing as executing the print up here, except it returned it, and then we can do whatever we wanted with that value, which I printed again. So that is a method right there. Alright, so now we're going to jump into classes. Classes are very important in Python. And right now I'm going to create a class called superheroes. And it looks just like that. And this superhero class, guess what? It's going to have this search contacts method in it. So classes can have methods. So let's move this up here like that. And I'm going to format it correctly by tabbing it over. So now we have a class called superheroes with a method in there called search contacts. But here's the thing. Any methods I have inside a class, I have to pass this parameter called self. And if you know any other programming language, self is just like this. When you create a class in another programming language, they normally use a key term called this. So this is the same as self here. And any method that I create within this class, that method has to have a self parameter as the very first parameter. And then after that, I can have any other my parameter that I want. Alright, so what do we know about classes? Classes always have a constructor, right? And this one, we can also define a constructor by saying underscore underscore init. Actually, we have to put def underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Then I have to also have the self parameter. There we go. Now this is the constructor. So in this constructor, I'm going to have some variables within this class, and it has to be declared like this: self.email. And I'm going to make that null for now. And then I'm going to have self.phone equals empty. And finally, I'm going to say self.contacts equals bracket, and that is going to have a variable called contacts within this class only that's empty. And I want to use this as this right here, right? So I have to say self. And when I say self.contacts in this method, it's going to set this variable that's declared within the class. If I didn't say that and I just said that alone, this contacts variable would be a new variable within this method only. But since I want to use it within the class and I have this initiated, I have to say self here. And I'll show you what I'm trying to do here in a moment. So I'm going to set all of this to self. Contacts there. And the rest is fine. See how this, I don't have to say self because this, I'm not declaring it in our constructor here to be used within the class. I only want this for our method here. So this is just a local variable x within this search contacts method. Alright, so now I'm going to create another method in here. And I'll show you why. I'm going to create a method called def set contacts, and this isn't going to take any parameter. Well, actually it's going to have the self parameter, that, and set contacts. I want to set this contact when this class initializes. So let me set it right here, and I'll show you why I'm doing this. So right here I want this to initialize when I call the class, and it needs to set this for me so I can work with it. So I can say self.set contacts. I can call that method, and when this initializes, it's going to go through this, set everything to null, and then it's going to initialize this for me and set the contacts for me. And then what I want to do is after it set the contacts, I can use it when I search for a contact because the contacts will already be set. So let's use this class here. I'm going to say hero equals superheroes. So this hero is now an object of the superheroes class. And when I call this, it's going to go through the constructor first, right? It's going to initialize, it's going to set all that. And then once it initializes, it's calling set contacts. It sets my contact for me. And so next, what I want to do is say hero.search contacts. And I'll search for Steve Rogers. So it's going to search. So since this is returning something, I have to set it to a value. So val equals hero, and it's going to return the email for me into this value, and then I'll print the value. So there you go. It initialized the class. I called a method within the class, and then it's going to return it for me where I can print it out. So this should now print the email for that, and let's see how it works. There you go. So you see how classes work now. Classes have a constructor. You can have methods within the class. So here is an example of what I can do with this class. Let's say I'm working with a database, And the database, when it initializes, I want to collect all of the contacts within my database. Let's say I have 1,000 records of contacts. And this is just an example where I'm entering this in, but in real life, I'm going to look through a database and create my contacts dictionary with using that database. And so this will be set up with like 1,000 contacts, right? And that's why I'm initializing this when I call the class. I want it to initialize here. I don't want it to initialize when I'm searching. That's going to take a while. I want it to immediately initialize and set up my database record for me, or set up this variable record using a database. And then once I have that, I can do whatever I want with those records because it's in this class now. It's initialized. And I'll go further with this. This is why I created this email phone. When I search, I can say email self.email equals that, which is the value. And I can also say self.phone equals x.get phone. So it's setting these values now in the class for me. So let's remove this. Let's remove this. And so right here, I'm going to remove this part where I return a string because I'm only setting stuff in here. I don't need to return anything. So let's remove this for now. I don't need that. And I'll create another method here called show contact self. And within this show contact, I'm going to say if self.email is not empty, I want to print it out. I want to print email is, and I'll say self.email, and phone is self.phone. So when it finds that, it will print that out. Else, if it doesn't find it, it will say print no record found. So what do we have to do here? I have to modify this now. Since this isn't returning anything, I can call hero.searchContacts, right? It's going to search for it. It's going to set it for me. It's going to set those. And then I'll have to say hero.showContact, right? And since that's not returning anything either, it's going to print out for me. So let's do this and run it. There it is. Oh, you know what? Guess what? I forgot the F in here. If you remember from our previous tutorial, this is how you print using these brackets. You have to have this F. So let's clear that out. There you go. Email, it found it for Steve Rogers, and phone number is that. There you go, Steve Rogers. So yeah, that is a class right there. And classes are very important in Python, and everything that we're going to create going forward, I'm going to think of it as creating a class for it, either having methods or a class for it. Now, an important thing that I want to talk about here is that to think through your classes, because you'll see that an error that I have here is that if I search for Steve Rogers here, right, and it returns a contact that it found, and then let's say I search again. Let's say I search for Spider-Man, and this one isn't found, right? But I'm gonna try to print it out again still. So here is what I'm doing, right? I'm searching for Steve Rogers. It's going to find it. It's going to print his contact information. Then I'm going to search for Spider-Man now, and Spider-Man is not in our contact. But let's see what happens here with this when I run it. You see here, it printed Steve Rogers' information again. Why did it do that? Because after it searched and it set these values, it's still in our class here. So what I have to do here is I have to set this to self.email. When it doesn't find something, I have to tell it, look, set it to empty again because it didn't find anything. Phone equals. So you have to do that. And so if I run the same thing again, there, no record found for Spider-Man when it finds it. So what I'm trying to say here is like, think through how things are going to work with your classes and set them appropriately. If no records aren't found, think through what you have to set your local variables here to be. Do you have to reset them? Because they are available throughout the class while you're using it. So this would have created a headache if, let's say, I was searching a database for contacts and I'm moving those contacts to another database. You know, it would have created duplicates or would have returned the wrong values for me. So yeah, that's the thing with classes, and I'm going to now move on to showing you what you should do with classes, how you should save your class files, and how to import them. And I have this wrong here, it shouldn't say includes, it should be import. And so with Python here, it's really import to include class files. Now let's look over here. I created a folder called inc, which is short for includes, and I have a file in here called heroes.py. So let me open up that heroes.py, and you guys can do the same thing, create a class file in here. And you don't have to name it inc, you can name it anything you want, you know, imp, import, whatever. I'm going to copy this, I'm going to cut that out and put into my heroes.py, and this is now going to be a class file. Save that, and I'll close that up. And now I want to import this into this tutorial file. So I can say from inc dot, see how it found a class file in there called heroes, import superhero. So I'm importing the superhero class that's in this file. So let's say if I had another class in here called something else, I can just import that class alone, and I don't have to import everything. In this import right here, I'm only importing the superheroes class, and I can run it the same way. See how it's a lot more clean? So if I run this, it'll still work. There you go. So that's how you import a file. And if you're thinking of putting your class files in your root directory here, don't do that. Create your class files in another folder and import it like this, because you're gonna have some headaches, and it's a lot more clean. You want to have all your class files in a folder somewhere else. And if I'm using someone else's classes, you know, I'll download it, I'll put it into this folder, and I can just include it just like this. I can say from and whatever that class file is, and I'll just import the class. But in case you're wondering, if you are including a class file that's in the root folder and not in another folder, you can say import like heroes, and it'll import whatever's in your root here. You don't have to say inc, because this inc right here is the folder name, and then I'm calling the class file. But here's the difference with using this import. I'll comment this one out, and I'll have to declare this like hero equals heroes.superheroes, because I have to call it by that and then call the class. So the last thing I'm going to cover is lambdas, and I'm just going to go through this really quick because I don't know if I'm going to be using lambdas, but I'll show you what it does. Let's say val equals lambda a times 2, and I'm going to print val and 2. So that's what a lambda is. It looks like a shorthand way to create a method that will just execute something for you. So let's run this, and there you go. You see I called value here, which looks like a method, but it's a lambda, and I just passed through a value. And if you put lambda a, which is our parameter, then it's going to use that parameter and do whatever it needs, and then return that back to the value, and that's what it looks like. And if you're wondering, can this act like a method here where I can write multiple lines of code here? Let's say I say a2 and I can print a, and I say a times 3 and then print that again. No, you can't. This is not like a method where you can do multiple lines. It's only one line. This is going to give us an error. Watch, if I execute that, see, you can't do that. So it has to all be in one line. But here's the thing, I can call a method within this lambda. I can say my method. Let's say I made up a method and I pass through the parameter again. So let's create a method here called my method and pass that through. And you know, it doesn't have to be the same. I can say y here, and let's say y, I'll return y times 4. So it's going to take 2, pass it through, and 2 times 4, and it's going to return that value, and I can print it again. So I can do that. Let's see how it runs. There you go. See, 8. So you can do that by using a lambda. You can create a method, pass it through, and then run multiple lines in here, and then return the value back. Yeah, right now I'm not sure how I'm going to be using lambdas, or if I will use a lambda. I'll probably just be using classes and everything else. But this is good to know. I think that's it for the basics on Python tutorial. I think everything going forward, I could just start creating some projects, because we know all the basics now. If you're like super beginner, I really suggest you go and learn about variable strings and all that stuff, methods, functions, and what classes are and everything like that, just to jump into it, because I am going at it as a little bit more than basic knowledge of programming. So some of the stuff in here, if you're super beginner, it might be confusing to you. But if you know some kind of programming language, I think you should just grasp the concept. It's really going through syntax on what to know and how to use them. And so yeah, going forward, I'm just going to start creating a project. In the next one, I might show how to set up GitHub and use it with Visual Studio Code here. Or I might just jump directly into setting up Django, and we'll create some web projects. That's the path I'm going for. I'm going to start with some web projects. So stay tuned. And once again, yeah guys, I am a beginner at Python. I'm just teaching myself. I've never programmed in Python before I started doing these tutorials. But I do know some programming languages, and that's how I'm jumping into it. And if you want to learn along with me, please subscribe to this channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good day.